Hi everyone, so as you can see I'm back to looking beardless and boyish. Hopefully the change is not too drastic as to shock you. I want to address a question that one of my viewers and one of my kind Patreon supporters, Kai, asked me. She was asking me about the link between depersonalization and INFJs. And in fact, I'm slightly reinterpreting her question. Her question was simply that she wanted to hear more about depersonalization. But I think the angle that I will take in this video is indeed to talk more about the phenomenon of depersonalization, but I will make it doubly relevant by connecting it to the INFJ experience. Okay, so I think we should begin by being quite clear, rigorous, and strict in our definitions, because these are serious issues. People who depersonalize would want to insist on us doing that too, because depersonalization, and which usually comes from which usually comes together with a related phenomenon called derealization, is the feeling, the distinct experience that you're no longer an I, that you're no longer the subject of your experience. You're no longer the center of your experience, all right? So imagine that, when you say I do this, I do that, I love you, I will see you later, I don't like this kind of food. You use I all the time. There is a locus and you're at the center. This is your subjectivity. This is the stance that you speak from. In depersonalization, there is an estrangement from that stance. The I stance becomes something that is no longer it's no longer housing you. It's almost like as if you've been pushed outside and you're looking at the I from the outside. So of course it's a very alienating experience. Right? That's depersonalization. You're no longer you feel like you're no longer the subject of your own experiences. Derealization comes with that usually, and derealization is, again, it's an experience and it's a feeling. You feel it in your bones, hard to ignore, where you feel an estrangement from the world itself. Everything around you feels either surreal or unreal. You don't know you don't know how you can relate to it. It kind of has the feeling that you are in a weird, disturbing movie. You don't know where you're placed in relation to that, and of course, by being depersonalized, well, that tends to provoke derealization, and it's a reverse link. It's bidirectional, as they say. You can also depersonalize as a result of realizing. So these phenomena are closely connected. Essentially, what you need to keep in mind, that it's not as if we can just say, oh yeah, like INFJ is depersonalized, because depersonalization and derealizations are symptoms of a particular psychic condition that is not. It's not a psychic condition that you could describe as well. You couldn't describe it as healthy, right? In fact, it's either a chronic symptom of quite a disturbed personality structure, usually psychotic, paranoid psychotic, or the forms of psychotic, or borderline, right? Borderline people have episodes of depersonalization, and we know that borderline is somehow in the kind of gray area between the neurotic, and the psychotic. Neurotic types can also experience phenomena of somewhat lighter depersonalization and derealization when they're experiencing intense periods of very, very, very pronounced stress and anxiety. More so anxiety than stress. And as you remember, and if you don't, you should keep this in mind. The difference between anxiety and stress is that anxiety, you feel unwell, you feel uneasy, it's really uncomfortable, but you don't know the source. In stress, you know the source. And one of the differences is that because you don't know the source in anxiety, you realize it comes from you, and it brings guilt on top of that, whereas it does not in stress. Okay? That's the one way of distinguishing between stress and anxiety. Very different things. Now, so you understand that the first domain where it's relevant to talk about depersonalization is actually a domain of not feeling wellness. So it's not something that we can just ascribe to the INFJ personality, okay? However, and I am really just encouraging you to take this with a grain of salt, because I'm just kind of experimenting here a little bit. Certainly not claiming to say anything like this is true, but I am thinking out loud, and sometimes that's the point of us doing these videos. We're exploring and we're making conjectures. Since I spent so much time saying that the INFJ is existentially alienated from external reality, right? Some people have been pointing out that this looks like depersonalization. And I've been emphasizing that depersonalization is a psychic symptom, whereas existential alienation is, as the name indicates, is an existential experience. But thinking about it further, I kind of realized that this distinction is somewhat arbitrary, because the psychic obviously bleeds into the existential, and the existential bleeds into the psychic. So it's not enough to say the difference between alienation and depersonalization is that one is psychical and the other one is existential. So my attempt would be to say something like this. And again, give me your feedback, guys, because I'm treading on shaky ground here, but I feel like it will be potentially fruitful. I feel like alienation is almost like a very low-key form of depersonalization. It's so low intensity that it's not really depersonalization, but there is still this feeling of estrangement, but the reality testing is intact. And our ability to cope with the world, to interact with other people, is pretty much intact, right? And we experience it when we're not feeling anxious. It's not tied to anxiety, whereas depersonalization is linked to anxiety, often trauma-induced anxiety. But not just trauma-induced anxiety. It's often that, but it can also be just very high levels of anxiety for other causes. Whereas, and that's where the existential is not psychical, because when your existential build-up is alienated, we don't need to posit any kind of anxiety. It's just how you're made. However, I think that because there is this alienation that's like kind of basic in the INFJ, it might make them more susceptible, and that's the conjecture that's quite daring, let's say. It might make them more susceptible to episodes of depersonalization when they are experiencing acute anxiety. For example, I am certainly not psychotic or borderline. I'm a neurotic type, but I have experienced depersonalization and derealization in episodes of high anxiety. And I thought, okay, well, does that mean that I'm actually maybe borderline, or, you know, and basically I was assessed with my therapist, and she confirmed that it was just an episode of extremely pronounced and unbearable anxiety that caused it. So it's possible that either the INFJ is more exposed to the risk of depersonalization due to alienation, or that if the INFJ in fact depersonalizes, the experience is more likely to be intense. Or both. But I want to consult you on this because I'm really not sure. I just thought it was an interesting conjecture to make. If you want to hear more about these topics and the life of the INFJ and how to be happy as an INFJ, how to lead a productive life as an INFJ, I have written 2 books on the topic, you know. The latest one is called The Infinite Soul, INFJ Life in a Modern World, and it looks at how INFJs can lead a life that is productive, meaningful, and rich while remaining authentically themselves, because that's absolutely key to INFJ flourishing, or so I argue in this book. So if you want to know more about this, check the book below. My books help people. They tell me every day. So give them a chance, because they do help people and they do give a lot of insight to people. Now, the other book that is the prequel, that is the first book to introduce the notion of alienation, is the Ecstatic Soul, a new look at the INFJ personality. And this is the deepest investigation into the INFJ mind that you will find online. There's no more sustained investigation of the INFJ than this book. It's all about the INFJ, and again, it's helped a lot of people as well. Check the reviews, you'll see they're positive, might make you want to buy the book. And as usual, guys, don't forget, the lifeblood of my channel, I could not do it without you, is kind support in the form of donations. There is a link below to my Patreon page. From less than $4 a month, and just €3 a month, you can really go a long way towards helping me continue to produce all this quality content for you. So please consider it. Keep in mind that you get some really nice perks as well. Access to our special Discord server, which has been a really great place of stimulation and mutual support, as well as access to bonus video content every 2 weeks. And on top of that, some other perks that you can discover if you check my Patreon. So thank you guys, and I talk to you later. Bye-bye.